Everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're gonna have a conversation about minimum wage. Everybody's favorite subject, right? It should be fun, it should be interactive. Hopefully, you'll leave lots of comments in here. We're gonna talk about the pros, the cons, and who should use minimum wage, whether you're an employee or whether you're an employee. When are they beneficial? When are they harmful? So let's get into it, guys. Like and subscribe on the way in. We love to have this kind of content out here so that we can hopefully facilitate conversations and people can learn a little bit along the way. I'd like to learn your opinions. Hopefully you're interested in my opinions and we can have a lively conversation inside of the chat. All right, so let's talk about advantages to minimum wage jobs. First of all, minimum wage jobs allow you to get on-the-job training. So employers will use minimum wage jobs to hire young and inexperienced employees so that they can teach them a skill set. So you use this minimum wage job as a way to learn a skill set so that you can move up to higher wages. And so that will be a theme about everything that I talk about throughout this and throughout most of our content. I encourage people to be entrepreneurs, and I encourage people that once you have a skill set, if you're working for a minimum wage job, to make moves often and to start your own business. I mean, that's what this channel is all about. So that's the context with the lens with which I look at things through. So hopefully that connects with some of you and it will resonate. So number two, the second advantage of minimum wage jobs is that it will reduce poverty, right? So hopefully minimum wage will be used in a way that it lessens the wage gap, right? We are in this strangest of times in this world where the haves and the have-nots are just getting further and further and further apart. And again, this channel, we're about getting outside of the rat race, getting away from these minimum wage jobs and getting into something where you have more control of it. You have financial freedom. Maybe you're able to build wealth. So, but an advantage to minimum wage is that it does reduce that have and have not gap, that wage gap. So you use minimum wage in order to set the bottom of the barrel, right? So that we don't have people that are working for below a livable wage. And hopefully that's a benefit to having minimum wage. So number three, then, it should also improve the standard of living for people who are employed, right? You have what you know as the minimum wage, and it's going to allow you to be able to have things like food and shelter and be able to afford to have a car maybe. I'm not sure that our minimum wage works that way at this point in our society in the United States of America in 2023. We'll get into that when we get into the disadvantages of minimum wage, but I'm worried that it's gotten so far out of hand with this recent inflation that minimum wage just can't keep up. And so that's one of the reasons why we encourage people on this channel, again, to be looking to move out of these jobs. But we'll keep going with the advantages. Number four, minimum wage will stimulate the economy. And I think this is true. So when people become employed, young people say, they go from living with their parents in school and they're not working at all, and now they become employed. And so even if they're working these minimum wage jobs, this will stimulate the economy because now the young people, they have money to pay for things like food and to go grocery shopping and to buy clothes, and maybe they're gonna buy a car or they're gonna rent a house and move away from mom and dad and get their own place. So by having these minimum wage jobs out there and allowing people to move into and learn a skill set, you're stimulating the economy. So those are 5 quick ways that minimum wage is an advantage or that minimum wage is good. What do you think about what I just said? Did any of those resonate with you? How do you feel about this, guys? Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. And now, let's get into what we think are the disadvantages of minimum wage. And so I've got a few here for that as well. Disadvantages to minimum wage. Number one, minimum wage could prevent employers from hiring people that don't have the skill set. So while I talk about minimum wage as a starter kit job, as a way for you to learn a skill set, it actually could be the opposite of that. Because if you have to pay a higher minimum wage than established businesses or businesses that aren't established, they just can't afford to pay that higher rate. And when they can't afford to pay that higher rate, that means that they don't hire someone who doesn't already have a skill set. So it's going to lessen your ability to get a job because it just costs too much for the employer. So that's number one. Number two, with recent price inflation, employers, businesses, they have to figure out a way to maintain profit margins in order to stay in business. And so if you add on minimum wage or higher minimum wage to inflation, it can often put new, young, or starting out businesses completely out of business. It can just be something that's just, one step too many and causes businesses to go out of business, or worse, causes people not to go into business because they think that they just can't afford it. So that's a hindrance. That's a negative for the minimum wage. Number 3, and this is a big one, and I hear it a lot because on this channel, we encourage small business owners. We encourage entrepreneurship, and we hear often about the cost to starting businesses and to getting started and the profit margins being low and not being able to compete with the big business, the big box businesses, or the well-established businesses that aren't growing. So it's a discouragement to entrepreneurship. It's a discouragement to the starting of new businesses. So they kind of start to stack on each other. And you guys can see this if you look through the eyes of the employer. I know oftentimes we just want to look through the eyes of the employee, and we want to make sure that we have this minimum standard, and we would call it even maybe a living wage. And guys, I'm not convinced at all that minimum wage is a living wage. I'm not trying to suggest that. In fact, I'm suggesting the opposite of that. I believe that if you're working for minimum wage, once you've figured out your skill set, once you've gotten that job and you know how to do it very well, go in and ask for a raise. It's time to move. And by moving, you can increase your wage. But you want to use minimum wage to learn a skill set and then go in and ask for a raise, or use the minimum wage job to learn a skill set and then go start a business if that's how you're wired. So number 4, and these kind of things all stack on each other. If minimum wage is the standard for someone who's starting out who doesn't have a skill set, and you make it too expensive, then you can no longer hire the people who don't have the skill set. You can no longer give them on-the-job training. And if you can no longer give them on-the-job training, you can't hire those people. So now you have to hire higher skilled people to do the minimum wage jobs, or just not have minimum wage jobs at all. So which would mean that you're only looking for people who already have the skill set, which does go back to what I just said a minute ago. Once you've got the skill set, it's time to get a raise. So those are 3 or 4 hindrances to minimum wage. Now let's next talk about who should use minimum wage to get started in business or to get started in life. And we've talked about this already a few times in the pros and the cons, both of them. Minimum wage, guys, I believe is for people who are starting out. So if you're a young person, if you're a teenager and you've never had a job before, getting a minimum wage job is a rite of passage. You go from living in mom and dad's home and they take care of everything, and now you've got to get a job. You don't have any experience, you don't have any education, and you don't have a skill. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to go find a minimum wage job, and hopefully you're going to learn a skill set. And that is one way, or that is one demographic that should be looking to use minimum wage jobs to get a start out and get a foot up in life. Number 2, anyone who's unskilled should be looking at minimum wage jobs, again, as a way to gain skills, right? We want to start stacking skills and then making moves and increasing your revenues and increasing your wages. We say it all the time on this channel, guys. Once you've gone into a job and you've learned the skill set, you're 90 days down the road, and you started out, let's say you started out working for my friend Patrick's roofing company here in Puerto Rico, and he's paying you minimum wage to go up there and learn how to be a roofer. And now you're 90 days in and you actually know how to do the job. One of 2 things is going to happen. If you know how to do the job, Patrick's going to give you a raise and you're no longer going to be working for minimum wage. And if you haven't figured it out in 90 days and you're still a hindrance, he's going to sit you down and say, look, I'm going to give you another 30 or 45 days, but if you don't figure this out quick, there will no longer be a job for you. And that's how that works, guys. So you use this if you don't have a skill to learn a skill. And again, once you've learned the skill, ask for a raise, go get a different job. If you get a skill set, say you're working on this roof and you now know how to put a roof on and you're making $9 an hour, just above minimum wage, but you're skilled at it, you know what you're doing, and you go to your boss and you ask him for a raise and he says, no, I can't afford to give you a raise, call the other roofing companies in town because someone's going to hire you. Now you've got the skill. You're worth more than minimum wage at that point. And by making moves, you're going to increase your revenue. Trust me on this, guys. I've done this in my life personally. I made a big move from Florida to Puerto Rico, and we've profited from it. This doesn't have anything to do with minimum wage, but just making moves and getting outside of your everyday circle of influence and getting into a new circle of influence, it's a great way for you to increase your wages, for you to increase your lifestyle, and for you to find a way to get the next step up and then continue to get the next step up. So if you can learn skill sets and start stacking them and getting new jobs every few years, maybe you get to be good enough at your job that you then want to become a small business owner or an entrepreneur. That's what we're talking about on this channel. If you like the sound of that, hit that subscribe button. I know you guys, a lot of people watch these videos and you see us over and over again, but you haven't actually subscribed. So we would love to have you join our community by hitting that subscribe button. We're joining a community of real estate investors and entrepreneurs who are doing deals together. We're not asking you for anything on this YouTube channel. I'm not trying to sell you a special way. I don't have all of the answers, guys. We try to have conversations. We try to be encouraging, and we would love to have you be part of our community. We want to have a community of people that are doing deals together. That's how we plan to monetize this YouTube channel. So go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button for us. The third person that might settle for a minimum wage job, that would be someone who's working part-time. So maybe you're a stay-at-home mom and you need to get a job to try and help make ends meet, or you could be a stay-at-home dad, but anyways, you got two parents and one parent is out there working their job, hopefully not at minimum wage, and there needs to be a little bit of more money to come in. So you're gonna go and get a part-time job and you work minimum wage when you're doing that. That makes sense in those cases, right? So that's a good place. If you're in that position, look for those minimum wage jobs. I still suggest that once you figured out the skill set, you ask for a raise. Number 4, we talked about this earlier when we talked about young people, but people that are transitioning into the workforce. So maybe you had a job and you got laid off. Maybe the economy got you, right? And you got laid off from your last job. You're a part of the 7,000 employees at Disney World that recently got laid off, and you're looking for something new. So you're in this workforce transition and you can't find the job even that you're qualified for yet. You may have to go back into a minimum wage job, get a new skill set. So this is the 4th place where people would look to these minimum wage type jobs. Number 5, one more place you should be looking for these minimum wage jobs for, at least for a season, is that if you're a low income worker, so you're economically disadvantaged and you've got a job maybe that you're not making a minimum wage, but you're making better than minimum wage, but you need to make more money. So go get another job, a part-time job, and you do that making minimum wage. And now instead of working just one 40-hour job a week, you work a 40-hour job and a part-time job making minimum wage somewhere else. You got to do what you got to do. You've got to put food on the table. You've got to provide for your family. So I'm not knocking it, guys. I've worked for minimum wage when I was young. I encourage all young people to go out there as fast as they can and get a job. And we've got other content on this about our educational system. And part of what I subscribe to here on this channel is that you don't have to necessarily go into debt and get the 4-year degree. You can get some real world experience while your friends are going into debt. And by the time they get a degree 4 years later on and they're $130,000 in debt, you've stepped up the ladder 3 or 4 times and you're making a hell of a living. Maybe you've become a master electrician and you started out as an apprentice. Maybe you're a plumber. Maybe you're a welder. Maybe you're the roofer that I talked about earlier. But these kind of jobs, and I talk about these kind of jobs because they're what I'm most associated with, right? Like, so we're real estate investors. In fact, we're value add real estate investors, and we like to fix things up. We like to take things that have a very low use and figure out what the highest and best use is, and then renovate them. So these kinds of jobs that I'm talking about, these are the people that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of them make more money than I do, right? Like, so my electrician, that dude gets paid well. My plumber, he gets paid really well. I would actually go so far as to say that I could imagine that my plumber and my electrician, they might make more than my doctor does, right? Like, that's just how that has gone in this world today. Having a skill is valuable, and growing that skill and starting your own business, which is what we always encourage on this channel, that's a ticket, guys. That's a way to get out of the rat race. That's a way to get yourself financial security. That's a way to get yourself lifted up out of poverty and put those minimum wage jobs into the rearview mirror. All right, guys, so there, I hope you got a lot out of this. I hope that we have a lively conversation in there. I know there's gonna be some people that are just gonna disagree with me and think that minimum wage needs to be living wage. And all right, guys, thanks for watching to the end. Make sure you leave a comment, give me a like at the very least, but leave a comment, tell me what you think of what I'm saying. Let's have a conversation about this. Are you a minimum wage guy? Are you ready to be an entrepreneur?